So you've probably heard the saying that says, when you are in retirement, you will pay less taxes than when you're working. And so what they tell you is, while you're working, defer your taxes because you'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. And that's something you've probably heard your entire life. And so in today's episode, what we're going to break down is the fact that this may not be true for those with pensions. And this could be true for the majority of people out there that do not have pensions. But remember, 20% of people have a pension. You're going to be left with a guaranteed income stream throughout your retirement that's going to force you into higher tax brackets and cause you to pay potentially more in taxes, especially if you've been a diligent saver and have all those retirement savings in tax-deferred vehicles. And so we're going to break down this concept of why this is the case and also what to do to plan around this to make sure that you can not tip Uncle Sam in retirement. And so that's what's in store of today's episode of Joe Knows Retirement.
Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
So let's break this concept down. We all know that having a pension is extremely valuable. You've seen all the content we've done on this. And if you have, for example, a $50,000 pension per year, then that is going to be equal to $1 million over a 20-year period, just if you factor in the simple matter of just receiving that $50,000 every single year for 20 years. And if you have even more than that, it's going to be even more of a payout. Or maybe you have a cost of living adjustment, or maybe, you have that. And on top of that, you have a bunch of investments that you're going to take withdrawals of. So we know that in retirement, your income is going to be higher than most. Now, I want to break this down further though, because a lot of people don't understand that over half people in the US pay no taxes at all in retirement. And so for most of the population, they will be in a lower tax bracket. But remember, you are unique. I wrote a book called The 2% Club. This means that only 2% of the population is in this category of high income, high net worth. And the reason why is because only 20% of people have a pension, as I mentioned, and less than 10% of people have $1 million saved or more. So if you have both of those, you're in the 2% of the population with more of an advanced situation that's going to require more advanced planning, considering those two things playing together. And so I want you to understand that, the standard deduction is the amount of tax-free income upfront. And if you're under age 65, that's going to be around $30,000 if you're married, and about half of that if you're single, that you're able to take out income up to and pay no taxes in retirement. And so that's why most people are in a lower tax bracket in retirement. They don't have earned income anymore. They don't have that pension like we've talked about. All they have is Social Security and then investment withdrawals from their IRAs. And so you can do the simple math. If someone only has $500,000 in their IRA, well, when they take out withdrawals in retirement, let's say when they get to age 73 or 75, due to the required minimum distribution that they're required to take out, that's going to force them to only take out about $20,000. So the RMD is about 4% of $500,000 when you turn that age. And so based on that, only $20,000 is going to be counted as income. And as you know, that's below the standard deduction amount that we've seen. And so they may not have a big tax issue throughout retirement. And then obviously we know with Social Security, that's based on the provisional income. So that's a more advanced calculation to determine if your Social Security is taxable or not. But basically the way it works is that those with lower income amounts, they're not going to pay any taxes on their Social Security. Those who have a little moderate of income, then that Social Security could be counted towards income. It may not be all of it, but maybe a portion of it. And then those that have really high incomes with really high pensions in retirement, they may force their Social Security to be up to 85% of that would be counted as income. And that's where you start to run into more issues in even raising your income even higher. But more importantly, the Social Security that you've worked so hard for over all these years is no longer in your pocket. You've got to give some up to Uncle Sam. And so let's bring down this concept of deferring your taxes. So again, like if you have that $50,000 pension per year as an example, if you have your Social Security, let's say it's another $50,000 on top of that, that's $100,000 of guaranteed income that you're going to have in retirement. And so that's ultimately going to push you out of the lower tax brackets in most cases when you look to go take investment withdrawals on top of that. And now we talked about that required minimum distribution earlier, so I want to spend some more time on that. A lot of the clients we work with who have pensions end up not necessarily needing all of that required minimum distribution, or just causes them to pay way more in taxes. And what I mean by that is when you already have that $100,000 of guaranteed income in that scenario, how much more are you going to need to really live the retirement that you need to? And, many of our clients have millions of dollars saved, and so they may not need all of that money as they plan their retirement. And so now when they get to this 73 or 75, the government forces them to take money out. Now, I always ask people, is that ever a good thing when the government forces us to do something? And of course the answer is no. And so in this scenario, it's not something we like, but we do have to plan for it. And so there's ways that we'll talk about later in this video that we can try to, mitigate that RMD or maybe reduce it, so it's not going to cause as big of an issue moving forward. And so you can see how this RMD, as we talked about in the example earlier, is so much more impactful for those who have been diligent savers versus those who haven't. How it's so much more impactful for those who have pensions versus those who do not have it. And we broke that down earlier, but this is where you got to remember your RMD is going on top of an already higher income. So when you pull that RMD out, it's at higher brackets versus if you had no pension, lower investments, it's not going to cause that big of an issue. So that's one of the first things we have to understand of why people with pension pay more in taxes, is because that RMD is on top of a stacked income that isn't there for most people. And we already talked about this one as well, but with Social Security, remember that's only taxable to a certain amount of people. And Trump just passed the one big beautiful bill, that bonus deduction that basically said that 80 to 90% of people will pay no tax on their Social Security. So I'm sure some of you have dug and seen if that's true or not true. I've seen both proven and not proven, but here's the deal. When you look at it, yes, most people are going to have Social Security tax-free in this scenario. But those with pensions and $1 million plus are probably not going to have it tax-free. And so you are going to be part of that 20 or 10% that are having to pay taxes on your Social Security. So again, there's ways to plan for that ahead of time. One strategy you could look at is maybe looking to delay your Social Security. And then maybe during the interim, you have more room and time to take out investments at lower tax brackets. So that's something we've seen people do. Now, if you're in poor health, you probably don't want to wait till 70 to take your Social Security. Get it while you can. So as much as that is in your pocket. So again, not a cookie cutter decision, but just trying to open your eyes to different things you can look at to reduce your taxes as time goes on. But Social Security timing of when to take it is a very important decision. And with our clients, we use it as an annual decision that we make. As soon as they turn 62, we are determining, should we turn it on or should we wait another year? We're not necessarily trying to determine when to take it today. If you're 55 years old, relax a little bit. The rules may change a bit. You don't know exactly what your situation is going to look like, but we do want to eyeball when we're thinking about taking it, but we don't want it to be a concrete decision yet. Financial planning, you got to stay loose. You got to make sure that you understand things can change over time. Rules change, legislation changes. There's a lot to be aware of. Now, another point I want to hit on here is when it comes to the tax brackets. So, we all know right now there's the 10%, the 12%, the 22, 24, that's where most of our clients are sitting. We have some clients that end up in the 32% due to their high amounts in tax deferred and their high pensions, but most of them are in those tax brackets there. And so as we know, there's a huge jump from that 12% to that 22%. And so we would love it if we could stay in that 12% or lower tax bracket throughout our entire retirement. But the matter of fact is, for most of our clients, it's not realistic. Now, for some of them it is, it depends on your pension amount and depends on how much you have in tax deferred when that time comes in retirement. But we have clients who have $1 million or more saved, and they're in that 12% or lower bracket. Some of them are able even to keep their income under that standard deduction by really, really proper planning. But again, most of our clients with pensions are not going to be able to do that because they're going to phase out of that with just their pension. So I want to bring up this point because if you look at how this 12% tax bracket works, is it goes up to about $100,000 is the limits on that. So it's a little less than that, but just to give you a ballpark idea. Now, understand that the standard deduction goes on top of that. So if your total income is going to be $130,000 or less, then there's a good chance that the majority of your income is going to be taxed at those lower brackets. And that's a great thing. That's a very low tax rate when you look historically, when you look right now. That's a place we want to be. But again, with the RMDs that we talked about, with the Social Security now becoming taxable, with the pension, the little three-legged stool many people will talk about, it may not be likely that you can stay within that $130,000 limit. And so some of you may be under that $130,000 before those RMDs turn on. And so some of you may be feeling pretty good right now. And then when those RMDs hit, if you have $3 million at that time, it's going to be $120,000 RMD on top of whatever you already have, which is going to cause you to get out of that bracket just from your RMDs, just from the simple math. And what people don't understand is, hey, if you have $3 million today and you're 60, what is your RMD going to be when you're 75? If you're not going to be taking any withdrawals or any large withdrawals, I mean, your RMD you could double your investments by that time. 3 million could turn into 6 million. And if you have $6 million at that time, your RMD is now $240,000 that you're required to take out from your investments. And so that's a very large amount that you have to take out on top of your pension Social Security that we're talking about here. And so you have to ask, what bracket are you going to be in at that point, or maybe even sooner, if you are going to need income from your investments during those years, especially if you have all your money in tax deferred vehicles. So right now we see most people that we work with, when they first come to us, they've got all their money in tax deferred and very little in tax free. And so that's going to cause what we call tax diversification to go the bad direction. So they don't have tax diversification. We'd like to see more of a balance so that you can choose what counts to take out from, so that you can choose which bracket you stay in. You can choose how much of your Social Security is taxable. You can choose how much Medicare premiums you're going to have to pay as well, knowing that's based on your income at those points also. And so back to my point about these tax brackets is, you're probably not going to be able to stay within the 12% bracket, probably not even now, probably not even right after you retire, probably not even later on in your retirement when RMDs start as well. And so because of that, you really probably are going to look to utilize that 22 and 24% bracket right now, because those may be relatively low tax brackets when you look historically. I always love the stat that, right now our highest tax bracket is 37%. Now, back after World War II, that tax bracket was 94%. And so historically, we've seen much higher tax brackets than we've seen today. Many people suggest that tax rates right now are among historical lows, and they're only going to be going up over time is what people suggest. I even think more strongly about that personally, knowing what happened with the One Big Beautiful Bill. We didn't expect tax rates to go down any lower, and they just did. And so a lot of people can be excited about that, but it's also to understand that, hey, even though they say this is permanent, it's likely going to change. You're probably going to have to find ways to raise revenues, and this is a way that they can do it is through taxes. So that's just something to be aware of as you do your planning moving forward, is knowing for the unknown tax rates in the future. But right now, we do know our known tax rates, and this could be a very attractive time to do that, to cause less issues moving forward, cause lower RMDs, cause us to not have to pay as much tax on Social Security, lower Medicare premiums, lower tax brackets. You can see how all of this plays together. Now, I just talked about Medicare premiums for a bit, but this is something I want people to understand with pensions and been diligent savers as well. Most Americans aren't going to have to pay more in Medicare premiums. Most of them are going to pay the base rate of that. But again, if you've been a diligent saver, then you are going to probably end up paying more in Medicare premiums. And so if you have over $200,000 of a modified adjusted gross income, if you're married, or about half of that if you're single, then you're going to have to start looking at Medicare premiums being a force on your retirement by causing you to pay more on those. Now, understand that this looks back 2 years. So if you're 63, you may think, hey, I don't have to worry about my income this year because I don't start Medicare till 65. Well, that's actually false. It actually calculates when you're 63 on that 65 premium, and it goes back 2 years. So when you're 66, we'll look at 64. So this is something that people with pensions are really concerned about, also known as IRMA. And so this is something that you can get ahead of right now by doing proper planning to ensure that your Medicare costs could be lesser or not as extreme as time goes on. And we always want to look at what's your lifetime Medicare cost and then determine what you need to do right now to plan for that. So there's two things I really want to cover here to make sure that you have a plan for as you think about how you are going to do this planning in retirement. The first thing is making sure you have a tax efficient income plan. We know that we have our pension. We know we have Social Security. We just don't know when we're going to take it, and we don't know how much of our investments we're going to need each year moving forward. And so we need to understand and think about, what is that going to look like for you? You're going to need around $120,000 a year, or you're going to need $200,000. What is that number? And then you need to build around that. And so understand, how much is your pension, how much is your Social Security when you elect it, and how much do you need from your investments on top of that. And then that's the first part of just understanding the numbers, how that works. But we got to take it a step further. Where are we going to get the shortfall to come from that's above our Social Security and pension that doesn't yet cover. And that's where we're going to have to pull from our investments. And so again, many people, as I mentioned earlier, have all their money in tax-deferred investments. When they take out income from them, they're going to have to pay taxes on that, and they're going to have to pay it at potentially higher brackets and with all the other things that we talked about here today. So something we always try to educate our clients of is that tax diversification. Not having all your eggs in one basket, but maybe instead of having more of a balance between tax-free and tax-deferred. Maybe we have a Roth IRA so that when we pull out income from that, it's tax-free. Or maybe when tax rates are really high, tax-free would be a great location. Or maybe, hey, tax rates are low right now. Well, we probably don't want to touch our Roth. We want to keep that growing tax-free. We'll take from our tax deferred investment. And so a lot of people don't understand that mix, and especially this gets even more complicated when you have a taxable investment, something that's going to be capital gains taxable as. I understand most people pay 0% on their capital gains in retirement if your income's under that $130,000 number we mentioned earlier. And so you may not have to even pay tax on capital gains for most Americans. But again, with pensions, high investment amounts, you're probably going to end up paying 15% capital gains bracket in retirement. So we do have to understand how that works as well. But also, if we're going to make withdrawals from that investment, we have to understand, is it going to be taxable or is it not? What's that going to do to our total income picture as we play it out there? So that's something we really have to understand, is how our investments are structured. Now, with that being the case that most people have all their money in tax deferred, one opportunity and strategy that we're usually recommending to this type of person is what's called a Roth conversion. And you've probably heard of a Roth conversion. You've probably even heard bad things about a Roth conversion. And I would actually say that for most people out there, as we've kind of talked about and keep the theme of this video, most people don't really need to look at a Roth conversion. Roth conversions are for those who have more income and they have more of a net worth. And that's when that's going to start making sense, so that they're not going to be in those higher brackets for the rest of their retirements and cause all of the other things to play a part. So basically the Roth conversion, you move money from tax deferred to tax free and you pay your taxes now. Now, no one likes to pay taxes, but you got to pay it now or you got to pay it later. And the other thing we always try to advise on with the Roth conversion is, hey, you probably don't want to do everything all at once. Small amounts over time to make sure that you're not bumping yourself up too high of tax brackets, but also making sure you're not leaving money on the table by not doing a Roth conversion or not doing enough. And a lot of our clients, as we talked about today, that 22% bracket, that 24% bracket, those are some sweet spots for them to look at Roth conversions. A lot of it depends on your age too, right? If you're 62 or older, it depends on if you're taking Social Security or not. So if you're going to take Social Security, that's going to give you less room to convert. Or if you're 63, hey, we got to start worrying about Medicare premiums. So, hey, going to the top of the 24% bracket, it could make sense, but we do have to pay increased Medicare costs for all the way up to that point, and it can be a pretty generous amount that you would have to pay on that conversation. Now, when it comes to that, what we typically look at our clients is, hey, does it make sense to pay more in Medicare premiums for maybe 1 year or a couple years or a few years in order to pay less lifetime Medicare premium? So I don't know what that's going to look like for your situation, but that's a thought process to think through of, hey, don't get scared about having to pay more taxes right now. Run the numbers, see how this plays out long term. And just as I started the video, remember, you will not likely be in a lower tax bracket in your retirement. And so it's very, very key that you can plan ahead of that and making sure that you know that that's going to be the case and you're not blinded by that. And a lot of people that we work with, it's a surprise for them. They go from paying paycheck to paycheck every day, and now they go, wow, we've got way more income than we'll ever need. And now they're worried about taxes, right? Taxes are the biggest expense in retirement for those with pensions and diligent savers. And so we have to plan proactively. And so if you like this video, if you like this channel, keep on watching. We'll put up 2 videos here for you to watch to go even deeper on topics like this so that you can be more informed and more educated as you plan your retirement, especially if you have that pension, you have that $1 million, and you're in that 2% club that we talk about often. So with that being said, we'll see you on the next video, and thanks for watching.